Hello, and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back. I am so excited for this first episode of 2024. We are starting off with a topic that is so kind of near and dear to my heart and such a part of the way that I support families with sleep, and that's mindset. And I am super excited to have a mindset coach as a guest today, Amanda, to talk all things mindset and parenting and sleep with me. Amanda, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about sort of your work and how you got into it, and then we'll jump into all the good stuff.
Yes, great. So like you said, thanks for having me here today, but I am a mindset coach for moms, and I use perspective to help coach moms through things like overwhelm and mom guilt, self-prioritization, so that they can take back control of their mom lives and feel better. Because at the end of the day, we can show up like the moms we want to be when we feel better. And I think that that's really key for a lot of the work that I do. So yeah, I have 2 kids myself, and I had initially started as a career coach, but got into a specific mom niche after COVID. So after my baby was born, I had a rough time with overwhelm and self-prioritization and feeling like a terrible mother. And when I decided to go back to coaching, I was like, this is exactly these are the things that I want to help other people with.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of it was focused around the way I was thinking about things and my perspective. And it's really powerful to understand how much that affects and shapes our lives and the way that we show up to things. And it's really all in our control. And I think that that's something that can be really powerful for people to understand. So I love being able to teach and share that and show that to my clients.
I love it. It's so true. Gosh, overwhelm and mom guilt and just taking care of yourself. I mean, that's so important when you're in those early intense years of parenting. I mean, it's always important, but those early years, man, they are rough.
Yes.
And as mom, you end up so much on the bottom of the priority list. For so many things, but I don't want to derail to that because I do want to start with I know we can derail ourselves.
We can
easily.
talk about it, all of it. Yeah.
Let's just dig into that first piece of like the power of perspective and your thoughts on how you show up in your experience. Like not even just about sleep. I've heard you talk about this. I mean, I think it's just so powerful. So let's just start there.
It's so crazy that we don't really understand or harness the power that we have over the thoughts our brain is thinking. We just fall into this natural space of believing the thoughts that our brain gives us as true, and they're not always true. Like we joke a lot about in the coaching world, like our brains are just crazy brain, because it is hardwired to protect us, and so it will always look for the danger in a situation. It will always steer negative. And that's just its way of making sure that we stay alive. And when you think about today's world and the dangers that we might be facing in comparison to, humans during cave times, it's really, really different. So we have to, what's so powerful about perspective is understanding and having that pause to realize like, oh, this is the thought that's happening in my brain right now, but I don't actually have to believe it. Like maybe I'm perceiving this as a problem, but maybe it's not a problem. And I think it's so fascinating to realize like how much we can control in our lives by having awareness around our perspective and the thoughts that our brain is having. It's amazing how much can change in your life once you just create a little bit of awareness around what your brain is thinking. And then in conjunction with that, allowing yourself to feel all of the feelings instead of hiding
Mm-hmm.
away from the emotions that might come up because of what you're thinking in your brain.
I love that. We just tell ourselves these stories about things that
Yeah.
are sometimes partially true, sometimes completely not true. And you're just like, oh my God, I made up this whole story about how I saw this mom friend at the park, and next time I saw her, she didn't say hi to me. She must have hated me, and I guess she doesn't want to be friends. You can just like totally spiral. And then it's like, no, she was like having a bad day. She was rushing late. She didn't see you, and you thought
100%.
she saw you. It's like, it's
100%.
crazy.
And our brain really loves repetition. And so once it starts to like tackle on a thought, like if you go along that example with like the friend at the park or the mom at the park, then the next time you'll look for reasons why she's not liking you. And then the next time after that, you'll
Mm-hmm.
look for more evidence on why she's not liking you. And so you start to really like spiral down this whole story that can be completely 100% not true, but you just happened to just have this thought and you didn't question it. And so you just built this whole story and all of the emotions that come from that story that you could have saved yourself if you had paused for just a second and like, oh, what else could be true here? Like maybe she's just having a bad day. Maybe she's fighting a cold. Maybe something else is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really crazy the story that we tell ourselves in conjunction with something like parenthood that's just a stressful and all-encompassing experience too. Like this is not to say that something's wrong with you for falling prey to the thoughts that your brain is having. Like parenthood is a really intense experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes so much sense that we can fall into what I like to call thought loops and belief systems based on, the intense experience of parenthood and the fears that revolve around things in parenthood. And I talk about it so much, like how this is an experience that we've never had before and there is no manual. And so there's a lot of stress that comes from that too, whether it's the pressure of like, I should know all of this, or I don't know all of this and this is bad because I'm going to mess up my kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to give yourself that space to specifically in parenthood to be like, wow, like this is a new and not difficult, but important, right? Like a weighty experience when you're raising another human being. Like I have to remember to give myself the chance to have everything, right? Like all of the emotions, those pause, that grace
Mm-hmm.
for this experience.
I feel like we're almost set up to create those narratives around sleep specifically because I don't know. I argue with myself sometimes, which is more worse and conflicting information out there? Is it sleep or is it feeding? Like I think it really is sleep.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much information, so much
Yeah.
conflicting information, so much pressure, and it's so much harder when you are not getting adequate sleep. And there's so much
Yeah.
fear-based manipulation, in particular around sleep, that we create these narratives of what we think it should look like and what we think we should be doing. And gosh, they can really, really create issues, those narratives, stress, guilt, feelings of failure that are hard because you're not very in touch with what other ways of kind of viewing the situation.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy. And I would even go as far as to say that sleep is probably more stressful of an experience than feeding with the information that's all the information that's
Yeah.
conflicting out there. But the cherry on top, which for the most of us I would say is true, is like you're dealing with sleep as a topic with your child while you yourself are not sleeping. Versus with
Mm-hmm.
feeding, like you're still fed. You might
Yes.
still be eating and you're struggling with, feeding issues with your children, but with sleep, like there is that added layer, like I'm also suffering because I'm not sleeping at
Mm-hmm.
the same time as dealing with this journey with my children.
Yeah. And I find in my work that how we view that journey, right? How we view what we think our kids should be doing and what we think we should be doing in response makes such a difference, right? It can cause so much stress and guilt and I'm failing, I'm missing my window of opportunity, like really spiraling. Or
Yeah.
it can bring so much kind of understanding and acceptance and confidence. And neither of those necessarily reflect how your kiddo is sleeping, but it really is about how we understand and perceive how sleep should be and what our little is doing,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think that that can be so powerful too when you think about how, like, your experience can be completely different based on you. You can have your child be behaving the exact same way, but depending on how you're managing your own expectations, the experience can actually roll out to be and the results from that experience can be completely different, regardless of how, like, your children can be the exact same child and their behavior can be exactly the same regardless. It's pretty crazy. It's not about them, it's really about you.
Yeah. I think about this a lot with like really natural tendencies in our kiddos, right? So like let's just take a newborn because I think the newborns are the most uncontroversial. We'll go more controversial pieces of sleep, but like so many parents are just not aware that we are carrying mammals and our babies are designed to be held, right? And so you're like, oh my God, this baby just won't let me put them down. And like, I'm doing something wrong. And like, I think there's something wrong with my baby. And why won't they happily sleep in their bassinet separate from me? And like, create all this stress. Or you flip around and be like, actually, this is what babies are supposed to do. And sure, maybe I want some space and maybe it's hard and maybe we'll work on being able to put them down. But like that switch and how you view it can be so different. And it's like, oh, babies being baby, newborn babies are newborn babies. But are you struggling against it or are you kind of leaning into it and knowing this is a normal thing that will change?
Yeah. And even just the way you're talking about it, those two examples, like, I can feel how different the emotions are as you go through both of those examples. And I think what's crazy that people don't realize is that you can choose to think one way or to think another. Like, it's not like this is just happening. It's like, oh, I can choose to think that it's okay and this is what's supposed to happen, or I can choose to believe that they're doing this to me and why aren't they sleeping in their own bassinet by now?
Oh my God, that they're doing it to me.
They're doing it to me.
Yes, that is so prevalent. And it's like, it's fed by all the misinformation out there, right? That, yes, there's a lot of information now out there about normal sleep and what is realistic, but there's also still way more information that's like your baby should be able to sleep 12 hours from 7 to 7 all night long without you. And if you can't do that, you're failing and you've missed this golden window of opportunity and like just this whole narrative.
Ruined.
This whole narrative. And so like in a lot of the work that I do, we start with like, let me give you the information, right? The normalization, the norms, the evidence base. And then even then though, you still have to work on the mindset, right? Like you need the information, but it's not, some people it's just like, oh my goodness, I'm good. And other people it's like, you have to reprogram your brain, right? You have to kind of unlearn and relearn and keep revisiting it because it's not like society stops telling you that you're doing a bad job, or failing or anything like that. You have to kind of keep re-engaging with that and reminding yourself.
Yeah. And that's okay. Right? Like there's still that piece of it. Like we tend to be so hard on ourselves that even when we go down that road of like having the information that we feel is most beneficial for us when we're talking about sleep with our children, like forgetting that or falling back into the habit of they're doing this to me or I'm just tired and I can't deal with this today. Like there is always that space to get back to like, oh, well, I have to, it's okay that I have to remind myself, like I can come back to my home base of understanding and having the information that is most beneficial for me and my family to use as that light, right? Like that guide for this journey.
I mean, that's how we use parenting affirmations, right? Like in those hard moments to remind us of a truth for ourselves. And, they can be really, really powerful and just shifting our view and having that sort of ritual of it. I know I've shared with you before we were recording this, my favorite one, parenting affirmation being, they're not giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time. And that for me, when my oldest was a toddler and a really intense toddler, like really, really intense, guys, like really, really intense. He is what got me like deep diving on responsive parenting and neuroscience, and the journey continues. Now he's not as intense, but just get like that reframe of like, if he is acting like this, his behavior is showing that he is struggling. And when I know he is struggling, that makes it easier to have empathy and not kind of step into that, oh, he's doing this to me or he's battling with me. And like, okay, I'm the parent. I need to show up and understand him. And I feel like that's so much for sleep too. It's like they're not waking up to torment you, right? They're
Yeah.
not they're not struggling to fall asleep just to make your life difficult. Versus seeing that kind of battling against each other kind of language.
Yeah. I mean, it was like when you mentioned that for me, it was just like, wow, that is so, even me as a coach, understanding mindset, like I still have those moments. And I was like, man, that is such a powerful understanding and reframing to know with your children because, like, I think we still go back to always like, you're tired, you're worn out, you're stressed. These situations can be stressful. And so having that to lean on to help you regain that compassion and being able to have more patience to support your children in those moments, like it can make all the difference.
Yeah. And so I want to give me your mindset perspective on a few things that I see a lot. Let's just do a little bit of that, right? Just
Okay,
to put you on the spot.
let's do it.
Sleep shoulds, right? And parenting shoulds, mothering shoulds, right? Like they should be able to go down drowsy but awake. They should be able to sleep through the night. They should be able to self-soothe. I should be able to do this better. How do you think of that from like a mindset perspective to like shift that feeling, that pressure of what you should or shouldn't be doing?
I mean, honestly, it really comes down to just not using the word. Like,
I love that.
it really does. It really does. Like, I think should is a word that doesn't benefit us because all
Mm-hmm.
it does is create guilt and shame. Whether you're saying I shouldn't have whatever or I should XYZ. And I think what I constantly tell people is like, just don't get into the habit of not using the word because it doesn't benefit you to should all over yourself all the time. It doesn't
Yeah.
create anything that is productive. Like it's not serving you to use that word. That is really just the super direct answer for that one is just like just don't use the word. If there's nothing that comes from using should that is going to benefit you.
I love that. I
Yeah.
like direct. Direct is good. I saw that's one I see a lot. Another one I see a lot is just that overwhelm, right? That like
Mm-hmm.
I can't even listen to myself because there's so much information, it's so much overwhelm. And maybe that isn't I guess it is a mindset shift, but I just love to hear your thought because it's not just moms just aren't overwhelmed about sleep. They're overwhelmed about a lot of things.
Yeah,
Sleep is just one of the more present and sort of central things for a lot of parents in the first couple of years.
for sure. I think what's so important to remember about this is I think overwhelm ends up creating a lot of inconsistency. And so when you understand that you're overwhelmed because of the level of like the thought that a lot of parents would have is like there's so much information out there or I don't know what to do. Like the overwhelm comes really because it's almost like coming in to cover up what's really happening for parents is their self-doubt. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I would recommend from that place is understanding like you're feeling you doubt yourself as a parent or as a person. And so we need to focus on building that trust, whether it is
Mm-hmm.
from working with a coach like you and being able to put their trust in you and your support or just in themselves, like understanding like maybe I don't have all the answers because I've never done this before and there is no manual to parenthood, but I can
Mm-hmm.
still trust myself to make the best decision that I can in the moment or
Yes.
to know what my children might need or to know what I need even in
Yes.
any given moment. It really goes back to build like the answer to overwhelm is really self-trust and building that self-trust.
I love that. I love
Mm-hmm.
that. And kind of going hand in hand with that, I talk a lot with some of my clients that are reading all the stuff, right? Consuming all the information to stop,
Yeah,
and to actively unfollow accounts and to be very picky about who they get information from once they know like what's their sleep path, right? If they're talking to me, obviously they know they want a
that's
responsive
it.
sleep path.
Right,
Okay,
right.
unfollow all the accounts that are not responsive. Unfollow all the accounts that make you feel like you're doing a bad job or tend to send you in like a spin, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not helpful. You're not in the information where you're like, what's my approach to sleep, right? That's when it's helpful to read different people's approaches. But otherwise, build up the voices that like match your values and what you want to do and ditch everything else.
Everything else. It's so true. But I don't think I think, like you said, like there is this belief like, oh, well, I'm just gathering information. Like this will help me understand what my sleep path is going to be with my children, or what I'd like that experience to be like, or how I'd like to proceed. Mm-hmm. There is that sort of thought error, like this is going to help me decide what I want to do. And it doesn't help. It just creates more overwhelm, because what's really happening in that moment is, again, that thought like, I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So let me gather some information so that I can figure out what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. You know, I feel like when it comes to sleep, and oh my gosh, I just totally lost my sentence there. Because that's the kind of day it is. Oh yes, when it comes to sleep, there's so much that we can not control. That I feel like there's a big piece in mindset and sort of piecing out what can we control and what can't we control. And obviously mindset is one of the things that we can control. Sure. And there's a lot that we can't control. Like you can't control if your kiddo has some health complications. You can't control if they're a highly sensitive, intense kind of temperament. You can't control a lot of pieces, but there are pieces you can control. And that's, I feel like, where I do a lot of talking about mindset work, around expectations, but also what can we control, what can't we control when it comes, to sleep and to parenting and to our littles.
Yeah. I think that, at least speaking from my personal journey with sleep and my children, if I had known that so much of it was really just about letting go, I think it would have been so much easier on everybody.
Yeah.
Letting go of that control and those expectations. And it's funny because I think when we talk about expectations, so many people are like, how do I actually let go of my expectations? And it really can be just as easy as having that talk with yourself. Like, I actually don't want to have expectations here because it's not going to serve me. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to let that go. Like, you really just have to have sometimes that's all it will take, just to have that moment of awareness to be like, oh, expectations aren't going to serve me here. So I need to let that go. And then you'll be able to let that go. It really helps things flow better. And I would imagine in your experience too.
I feel like some of the most hardest and most rewarding clients are the ones where there's a lot going on with their kiddo, right? And our success is in making peace with where their things are and in building coping strategies for that phase. And so it's not, this isn't every family I work with, of course, but with some of these families, it's not about getting the magic sleep pattern for their baby or their toddler, but it's about that surrender and acceptance. Like, this is the kind of child I have. This is the journey that it's going to look like. And right now, this is where we're at. And down the road, we'll work on this goal, but we're not at a place where we can take that next step towards that goal yet. Right. Yeah. And those are deep and hard things to wade through with people sometimes. It feels more rewarding for everybody when it's like, here's our sleep goal and we do X, Y, and Z and we work towards it and all that. But sometimes that's not in the cards for some kiddos at that point. And that acceptance and letting go of what you think it should look like is really powerful.
Yeah. I think the other thing, I'm going to pull up here, there was a post that you had recently that I was like, oh, this is so good. When you were talking about, like, what if we didn't view sleep independence as a race to see who can get there as fast as possible, but a journey in which you simply need to take the next right step for your family. Like, I think that is so powerful. Like, you talk about how seeing it's a process with ups and downs. Like, there's not necessarily an end goal to even have. Like, that might be the number one mistake that we have, right? Is to see it as a race with a finish line versus as a journey with lots of ups and downs.
Yep. So true. And I mean, I think sometimes, I guess this is really a mindset thing too. Like, I talk a lot about, like, when people are like, oh, in the moment, how do I make the decision? Or how do I know when that next step is? And I'm like, it's it's really about looking at your kiddo and centering connection with them, right? Does that next step involve, supporting them, even supporting them with their big emotions, right?
Yeah.
That is part of parenting as well, is like, all right, we're going to use connection, we're going to support them, and we're just going to see. And maybe in this phase, we don't take any stops. And maybe in another phase, we do. And that kind of dance, over time.
Yeah.
I don't know, anyone with older kids knows sometimes older kids need extra support for a period of time because they're feeling really anxious. And, it doesn't look like a baby, but it's not that straight. Oh, now they're independent. Check, done. Like, moving on. That's not how kids work.
Yeah. Yeah. They're constantly changing and developing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if even right now my 4-year-old's going through a sleep regression. Like, maybe it just doesn't end and it just continues to evolve. And I think if you were able to view sleep as in that perspective, then there would be less pressure to like figure it out, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it is anytime that they're going through a lot developmentally, anytime there's a lot of change or extra stress in the family, or just anything that's making a kiddo feel a little more uncertain in their body, then sleep tends to suffer. And that's true for adults too. And we think we forget that, right? That our sleep is tied to our emotional and physical well-being just as much as our kids' sleep is tied to them. They just have these big waves of development that come in, and their bodies are big, their brain is busy building connections around a new skill acquisition or new awareness of the world in a way that we don't really have as adults. And so that's just a whole nother layer that comes and kind of shakes things up and derails sleep for a period of time. But there also are a lot of common themes between, hey, grown-ups sometimes have trouble sleeping, not caused by our children. And so do big kids, right? And so do little kids and babies.
Yeah, so true.
And so, I feel like once parents are able to drop or adjust their expectations and show up, then it's also a big piece about not putting off taking care of yourself so that you can show up, right? Like there's like this whole mindset piece, but around expectations and around what that kind of supporting sleep over time looks like. But then there's also, I feel like, this piece that gets so overlooked when it's like, to show up and do all that work, you also have to show up and take care of yourself and not be like, oh, wait till the baby's sleeping better, the toddler's sleeping better. Because there's just such a stress management, self-care piece that affects how we can show up in that kind of mindset dance.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I know this is a big topic for you.
It is. It's a huge topic. I think that it's like so many people don't like, I think motherhood and parenthood in general, there's this expectation like, oh, well, you're a good parent if you put yourself last and you put your kids first.
Yes.
And so flipping that script, so that's like, no, actually, you're a better parent when you actually take care of yourself and, when appropriate, put yourself first. And I kind of want to explore this a little bit and see what your take is, because I think there is always the opportunity with anything in life to have the kind of perspective that makes things easy. But I think it's pretty safe to say that sleep in regards to your babies and your toddlers and your children can just be a journey that will have, like we were talking about, ups and downs and moments of stress and moments of ease. Like, it is the same way that I would feel comfortable saying like parenting is just tough. Like sleep sometimes is just difficult. And because we are involved, like I was saying before, like we're also suffering sometimes from lack of sleep ourselves. Like sometimes I think taking care of ourselves can be key into helping make that experience easier.
Yes.
And so it really is so important to understand like this experience can be difficult. And so arming myself emotionally with sleep or with good food or with self-care in whatever way that looks like will help me be better prepared for the tough that is the theme of sleep around my children.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like there is that tendency to push it down the road that I see, but then also that it's like, it has to
Yeah,
be my
definitely.
needs or baby's needs. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be one or
Right.
the other, right? We
Right.
can find a place where we are taking care of you and we're also still meeting baby's needs, but that might not look like what it did when you were 25 and didn't have kids, right?
Right.
Like that self-care, that taking care of yourself might not mean that you get to indulge everything that you would normally do when your kids are older or when you didn't have kids.
Right.
It's often that like not exciting stuff, right? Like
Exactly.
that is important to take care of yourself. And, when you're in a really tricky spot with sleep, it's a lot about, okay, what is our goal? Is it prioritizing sleep? Because we can do a lot of things to prioritize sleep that a lot of parents also resist, even as they're really sleep deprived. And so I think that what's our priority is a big piece when it
Yeah.
comes to self-care, as well.
Yeah.
And
And
to
going
remember
back
we
to what,
weren't supposed to do it all alone. We were supposed to have lots more
yes,
support than just, us.
us. That's it.
Yes.
That's it. It's just us. But I think it's also important to bring up again expectations around what self care looks like at this stage, right? Like
Yes.
that ends up creating a lot of frustration on that front too. Well, like I should be able to get a full night's sleep, right? There comes the should again. Like I
Mm-hmm.
should be able to have a hot meal without any disruption. I should be able to go work out. I should be able to do self care in the way that I think self care should look like right now.
Mm-hmm.
Those expectations really just like they don't help. They just
Yeah.
create disappointment. They really do.
Or even like things like, I should be able to go out on a date night with my husband or my partner, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we should make sure that you we should make sure that you have time to connect, but does it have to be a date night, right? Does it have to be
Right.
dinner if you have a baby that really struggles to go to sleep for babysitters, right?
Right.
No, it doesn't have to be, right? And so there's so many ways when we can expand the way we're thinking about something, like whatever it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
to think outside the box a little bit. When we kind of
For
let go
sure.
of that really narrow definition of this is what it should look
This is
like.
what it should look. Yeah. And still creating space for whatever emotion is going to come up. Like if that's what you really want and you're experiencing disappointment because you can't have the date night that you wanted, like it's okay to feel disappointed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Create that space for yourself, but not so much so that it is keeping you in that space, right? Like having a moment to be able to feel these emotions and then being able to coach yourself into a different place and understanding like what is like how can I create an experience now that still creates that connection for me and my husband that maybe looks a little different than what my expectations are or were in the moment.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight, you've said it a couple times and I love it, just that space to feel the emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than pushing them aside or denying
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
is such an important part of just like honoring, this is how I feel.
Yes.
And then we can kind of begin with the cognitive reframes and like the mindset work and all that, but we can't ignore the feelings and the feelings aren't wrong, right? We just
Yes.
need to acknowledge them and sit with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have to
Um,
be there for ourselves too.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I feel like just kind of circling back to like, what can we control? What can't we control? Right. Which is, I feel like a theme of parenting, and maybe a theme in
Yes,
mindset
most
work.
definitely.
Like, we can't control a lot, but, being willing to do that work to examine how we're thinking about things is so much within our power. And, I just feel like those shifts, they're so much more powerful than people give them credit
Yes.
for, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, what does it matter about realistic expectations? I'm like, that's everything. Like you have to start
Everything.
there.
Yes.
You have to understand your kiddo because otherwise it does feel like they're doing this to you and oh, that doesn't feel good versus, oh no, this is hard, but I can do hard things. And this is where my kiddo is being normal and it's society that's not setting us up for success.
Yeah.
Those other things matter a lot.
Yeah, they do. They can make all of the difference.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I could always talk to you forever.
I know.
But sort of in wrapping things up, thinking about our conversation and your work with parents and What would you say is sort of like last thoughts on the role of mindset when it comes to supporting sleep and supporting yourself as a parent?
Like what we were saying, like there's an opportunity to have a lot of power in your mindset. Like that's where a lot of the power resides, and you are in control of your mindset. But also,
Mhm.
and I know it seems like a little new agey and a little touchy feely, but it really, it's like so much of this comes back to loving and being there and honoring yourself. Like if
Mhm.
you are coming at anything in parenthood from a space of you don't trust yourself, you are being hard on yourself, you are not loving yourself in whatever way that that's presenting in a given moment, like it's going to create a result that you're not going to be happy with. Like so much of this work goes back to like if you love and respect and care about yourself, then that will end up being the best place to start when you tackle things like sleep or mom guilt or even feeding, like we were talking about earlier. Like it really is the center of everything when you can be there for yourself no matter what.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like that love and compassion allows you to tap into those instincts and intuition, right?
Yes.
And pair that with knowledge. I'm a big
Mm-hmm.
fan of both. Like we need the knowledge and we need that trust of ourselves and that intuition because there's not one right way to do things. And every baby and family is different. And bringing those two together can really be magical.
It can. It's like the recipe for success, really.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Awesome, Amanda. I love talking with
I
you.
know. So I
I
do. I
feel like
really
we could
do.
we could do like a whole series of episodes together.
Yes.
But before we wrap up, tell folks where they can find you and your work. And of course, I'll also put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah. Well, I think my home base is definitely on Instagram. You guys can find me at that mom life underscore coaching. But I also am on Facebook and on TikTok and my website in case you are interested in finding a little bit more about what I do. Although I always encourage people to just chat. Like there is no pressure with just having a conversation and getting to know someone as a human being outside of
Mhm.
actually working with them. But my website is www.thatmomlifecoaching.com. So I hope to hear from all of you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining
Thank you,
and chatting with
Kim.
me and
So
talking
fun.
mindset. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.